Welcome back. It is exactly 9:40 a.m. and we're now joined by Hassen Seria. He is the Press TV correspondent based here in South Africa, and we're going to be talking about the US target and blow up of three of Iran's supposed nuclear facilities. Hassan Seria, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum salam. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so I think the press and news has been absolutely on fire regarding this strike by the United States on Iran. These three supposed nuclear facilities. There's a lot of talk about, there's no threat to the environment or the people in the area regarding nuclear leakage, etc. There's certain reports suggesting that any nuclear enrichment um, facilities or equipment was moved out of Fordow a long, long time ago. I don't know if it was wise to make such a statement, because if that is in fact the case, then
Mm.
I think the United States, Trump is going to be absolutely incensed. He's going to want to find these supposed uranium facility and he would want to then blow it up. But what exactly is the story here? And is it true that there has been no uranium leakage? There's no threat to lives in that part of Iran? What is the story? What are you hearing and your understanding of the situation?
Well, I think the important thing to begin with is probably the fact that those strikes that took place over the weekend, of course, people were looking, I think, at that 2 week window that Donald Trump himself had announced. And I think the US used this together with some of the reporting, similar to what the Zionists did when they launched that shock and awe sort of operation a week ago on that Friday evening, when they struck Iran, targeting the top military leadership and, of course, the advisor to the the supreme leader of Iran, Said Ali Khamenei. We look at this particular attack, and that is exactly what they did. They used the media, yeah, they used a certain type of information as a form of subterfuge to get the Iranians to believe that we were in a sense, or in a period where there were negotiations happening, for example, in Europe, with the Iranian foreign minister meeting there with the E3, for example, going to Turkey as well. So there was that expectation, and at that particular point that the Americans struck. The word from Donald Trump at this point still is that his sense is that America, as he put it, obliterated or totally decimated these three nuclear sites of the Iranians. The Iranians, of course, understanding that this day of a Israeli attack and potentially an American attack as well would always come. They clearly have made the preparations for this type of a situation, and therefore, as they have announced, and as you pointed out, that they already took the uranium and any of the fissile materials away from these sites already in anticipation of such a strike. So, of course, that changes the situation to a certain degree. But I think if we look at it from a broader sense, what the Americans were trying to do here was really uh, to send a particular message. And I think this was more an attack of symbolism rather than one in which they understood that they could completely decimate the nuclear facilities, particularly here when we talk about the Fordow site, which is quite deep in the mountain ranges. And at that depth that it is, even America's bunker busters cannot reach to that sort of depths.
Oh,
So if there was any sort of indication of a sort of effect on the Fordow site, it would probably be because of the impact, but not because the site itself was obliterated. We know what the Iranians are saying now is that the site at Natanz was completely destroyed. It's saying that at Isfahan there was limited damage as well. But clearly, the Iranians had put in place the measures to ensure that there was protection for the sites. And there's possibility that, of course, there's no indication of where that uranium has been taken or to what extent the Iranians actually evacuated these sites. Did they take the equipment out of the sites? Did they merely ensure that there was no staff at the sites and that the uranium was removed? What sort of preparations the Iranian made, we don't have a full understanding of as yet. And the indications at this stage is also that the Iranians themselves, even the IAEA inspectors that are always present in Iran, have not yet managed to get to these sites to do actual assessments of the extent of the damage. For example, at the Fordow site, it is the entrances that were affected, we understand, and of course that would limit the capability or the capacity to get to the actual nuclear site to be able to do a full-scale assessment. But that is what we know at this particular stage.
Hassan, do you think that for now the Iranians should play this, play it keep it very close to their chests, because Netanyahu and obviously Trump himself, very impulsive, very devious, and if they believe that there is still uranium in the hands of the Iranians, they probably will go after them, and this could really escalate in the region, and God alone knows where it will end. So that's the one part of my question. Trump is absolutely impulsive. He can't be trusted. Neither can Netanyahu be trusted. Do you believe that further action will be taken by them, or is this now going to be a wait and see game? Is the world watching with bated breath to see what Iran is going to do? Are we, as a global population, waiting for some sort of action by Iran? And if Iran doesn't take any action, would that then indicate that they are willing to go into discussion with Trump for some sort of an agreement, whatever that might look like?
Okay, I think there's multiple layers to this question. So I think firstly, if we were to look at the situation as far as Donald Trump is concerned, as you mentioned, there is no understanding to how Donald Trump operates. He does not adhere to any form of diplomacy. Even if you look at the situation in the United States now, there's a massive debate about whether he had the authority as the president of the US to carry out the strike, or should he have gotten congressional approval. When we look at it from an international perspective as well, should the US have had UN sanction in order to carry out a strike such as it did, or should it have waited? The Iranians, of course, as you can well understand, when looking at the developments over the past 2 weeks, firstly, the fact that they were in negotiations with the Americans, and there was a session that was scheduled for that very Sunday in Oman, in fact, when the Israelis struck. And again, this happened now with the attack on the nuclear facilities. The Iranians were in talks with the Europeans, and then again, the Americans struck. This naturally, as from the Iranian side, will make them very wary and very cautious about any form of negotiation, because clearly here we have two particular incidents within the span of barely a week where they were sitting at the negotiating table, and the other party here, in this case the Zionist entity as well as the USA, went ahead and initiated a brutal military attack. If you look at the initial one where senior military figures were assassinated, it's not just a symbolic strike. And then, of course, this particular strike, which targeted three of the nuclear sites of the Iranians. So the Iranians would come to the table, if they even do, asking these type of questions. How much trust can there be? In addition to that, if we look at the comments from Europe and from the Western powers, all of them are saying now, after these strikes by the Americans, that Iran must come to the to the negotiating table. The reality is that Iran never left the negotiating table. It is the Europeans and the Americans and those that have been propping up Israel and this regime for now over 7 decades, including during this time of genocide, that have been arming it, that has been watching as it has been committing all of the crimes in the Gaza Strip, that it is them that have been complicit in these attacks against Iran during this period. So I think from a level of trust, Iran will definitely show that they will be a lot more cautious, and that does impact on the possibility of any form of negotiations going forward. I think it's important to note also that this is not about uranium or about Iran's nuclear program. This is about the fact that there is a government within the region, in this case Iran, that has stood up to the global Western dominated and Western governed system, and of course to their outpost in the in West Asia, in the region, that is of course the Zionist regime of Israel. This is what it comes down to. So whether it is about the uranium or not, that is clear. It is not about that. And Donald Trump has again given indication in one of his latest posts, saying that a coup against the government of Iran is something that is on the table. So this is in line, of course, with the way in which Donald Trump operates, where he wants things and he wants them his way at whatever cost. I think what the Iranians have been showing is that despite the threats that they could, for example, close the Strait of Hormuz, that they would strike American bases within the region, they have shown that they will still forge ahead with the diplomatic process. We've had the session at the UN Security Council. We've seen the flurry of contacts that the Iranian foreign minister has been making. He is, for example, in Russia, talking to the Russians, seeing what sort of international approach they can take to the current situation. But Iran has been following this line of maintaining its operations within the diplomatic sphere and within the confines of international law. This is similar with the IAEA. Despite the accusations against the IAEA, despite the failures of the IAEA, for example, in this case, 3 nuclear sites that have been targeted, and the IAEA, which is supposed to look at the very protection of the global population when it comes to nuclear fallout, has actually failed to even issue a clear statement. And the IAEA's complicit role in triggering the Israeli attack as well. Despite all of this, Iran has still maintained and sort of taken the approach of adhering to international law, writing to the IAEA, indicating that it will be taking legal action, that it reserves its rights within the confines and the framework of the IAEA as well as the NPT. What the Iranian parliament at this stage is considering is, of course, the possibility of leaving the NPT. That will maybe change things, but I don't think that will let off the scrutiny that the West and the Zionist entity has been pushing for on Iran. I think the
Can I
critical
just come in here?
thing to look at.
Can I just come
Mhm.
in here? Is Iran is not the only country with a uranium enrichment program. There are other countries as well. And you alluded earlier on that it's not about the uranium. So we do know that in 1953, the CIA um, actually took out the democratic Iranian government, and they put in
Mm.
their puppet the Shah. Perhaps this is what it's all about. Lots of people are whispering or suggesting that America and the rest of the Western world are wanting a regime change in Iran, and this is how they are going about it. So that's the one thing. to bear in mind, and you can respond to that. And also, when we talk about uranium enrichment, the bombing of these facilities, and again, Iran not having retaliated immediately. Clearly, they are going the diplomatic route. Other countries and perhaps people in their own country might look at it as saving face. Your thoughts?
I think so. Looking at that particular point, I think the Iranians, for them, the option is first to exhaust the diplomatic means, to see what can be achieved at that level, despite the disparities, despite the double standards that is so evident and has been made even more evident over this 2 year period with the genocide that is being committed in the Gaza Strip and over this past week as far as Iran itself. Despite all of that, the Iranians are saying that they will exhaust these avenues. But I think what is clear from the Iranians is that they are saying also that they do have the options on the table, they do have the capability, and they seem very confident that they have the capacity. There's also been some suggestions from the Iranian side that there is a coalition of states or parties that will come together if they so deem that the situation has escalated to that level where this is now a far larger war. And of course, for us as people in the world, the concern about that is that we could be looking at a global or much broader conflict. And that is, of course, a concern. As far as the Shah is concerned, I think this is an attempt, of course, by the Zionist regime to impose again. And I think here, I know the term regime change is used generally in the media, but this is really a euphemism. This is essentially a coup that the United States has carried out in many countries around the world and is now showing and even making the statements from the American president that they are willing to carry out. But this is an attempt to place in Iran a regime that poses no threat to the Zionist entity, that is a weak regime, just as we see in Syria, for example, at the moment, as we see what they've done in, for example, Iraq as well. All of these places where the Americans have been complicit in staging coups against stronger regimes or regimes that pose some sort of a threat to the Israelis. So that is exactly what they are trying to achieve. What the attack on Iran, however, has shown us is that instead of causing the divisions that the Americans and the Israelis most likely would have wanted to have seen, is that Iranians have all coalesced and they have all united around the Iranian flag. We're talking here about a civilization with thousands of years of history. We're talking about a civilization that is very proud of its heritage, that's proud of its identity. And whether we talk about people as the Western media would normally put it, reformists or hardliners, or even those that are totally against the regime, all of them have come together at this particular point under the banner of the Iranian flag, and they are supporting their government because what they've seen from this government is that this government, up to this stage in this conflict, has demonstrated that it has not merely been talking, it has been working, it has
Mm.
built up a defense program, it has developed systems that it can, for example, despite that initial attack by the Israelis, in which the top brass of the IRGC and the military were taken out, despite all of that, within a matter of hours, it had recovered, it had its systems in place, and it could strike Israel in a meaningful way. So this has already shown that it has had the opposite effect within Iran. And if the Shah is installed through a coup by the Americans or the Israelis, all it will mean is that a weak Iranian system or regime will come into place that will probably take us back to the days of the Shah, a repressive
Mm.
regime, a totalitarian regime, which of course the Americans and the Israelis would like to make the world believe they are against, but actually these are the type of regimes that they impose on the people of these countries.
Hassan, that's where we have to leave it, unfortunately. Thank you indeed for your insights on this matter. Till the next time, assalamu alaikum to you.
Wa alaikum salam. Shukran for having me.
It is 9:59. Inayat Wadi is standing by to talk with us as well, so we will be joining him in literally a minute's time. Please do stay with us.